Hello, David. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We are recording. May I ask you for a brief introduction of you?
Sure. I'm David Johnson. I'm a drama therapist. I live in Connecticut, the USA. I've been a drama therapist my whole adult life. And I also became a psychologist. And I've lived here in New Haven, Connecticut also since I was 18. I'm 72. And I'm married and have two children who are adults now. One just got married 3 weeks ago. Yay. And it was wonderful. And I'm really interested in answering your questions and talking a little bit about my journey in drama therapy. I was very involved in the formation of the drama therapy profession in the United States as a young person. So it's been something of a great deal of passion for me.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's the question which I'm very interested. In your papers from 91 and 83, I'm not sure if I'm correct. The early papers about developmental approach to drama therapy and like this. I read that in some way you inspired yourself for developing DvT in dance movement therapy, if it's correct. And I didn't find any history, like how you found it. And I'm very interested about it. Like, what was the first spark of inspiration for drama therapy, or how did you find a way?
Well, I was a undergraduate at Yale University in 1969, and I came there with a background in mathematics and physics. And I quickly realized I wasn't that interested in that and was more interested in things like philosophy and psychology and theater. And so I shifted my interest while I was in college. And it began for me personally when I literally on a lark decided to join an improvisational troupe and started to improvise. And I found very immediately that I loved to improvise. We had done some of that as a child, when I was a child in my family. We would improvise skits and do things like that, but we were not a theater family. But I loved improvisation. And so I became a theater major and put on different shows. They had a psychological kind of twist. I was very involved with the avant-garde at the time, Grotowski and Chaikin and the Living Theater and all the experimentation with the audience. Now that in New York City at the time, very much influenced by that. And in my senior year, I put on a show, a play, and a group of people from the local psychiatric hospital came as part of their outing to come and see it. And the staff member, who was a dance therapist, Susan Sandell, saw the play, and their theater person at the hospital had left, and she was looking for a new theater person for the psychiatric institute, Yale Psychiatric Institute, which was a long-term place. Patients would come there for 3 years.
Oh.
Yes, 3 years. That was like the old-fashioned way of doing treatment.
And which diagnosis, may I ask you?
Yeah.
Which diagnosis in the treatment, like all the stuff, or any specific depression, schizophrenia, trauma?
Mostly schizophrenia, but also severe personality disorders, bipolar, seriously ill people that needed, and young people. They were young, in their early, most of them. And anyway, so she hired me, and I was thrilled because I was able to do theater and in a psychiatric hospital. There was no profession of drama therapy at the time, in 1973, when I was hired, and there was only psychodrama. And so I came there. They had a dance therapist, Susan. They had an art therapist, and they had a music therapist. And those professions had already started. There were already associations. So they said, so you are now the drama therapist. And I said, well, I'm just a theater person. I mean, I'm interested, but I haven't done anything in psychodrama, and, I'm not really a therapist. They said, no, if we're a music, art, and dance therapist, then you're the drama therapist. And so that's how I became a drama therapist. I understand it costs a little bit more now, but for me, it didn't cost anything. And so I became the drama therapist. And I was very interested in movement. And so Susan and I began to work together. We eventually married, and she was my first partner. And so we worked together very closely. We wrote a lot of papers together in dance and drama therapy. And we were really interested in the difference the patient's experience was when they were moving for when they were doing theater or doing improv. It was really quite interesting. And that's really where I really became completely excited and passionate about the work. We put on plays. We did the beginnings of what would become DvT came from our dance and drama sessions. Much of DvT comes from dance therapy. Marion Chase ran a group which starts just the way DvT does, and I took that from Marion Chase. And the individual work with the witnessing circle was influenced by authentic movement and Mary Stark's White House, which was who. But it took quite a while before I was able to figure out DvT. But the beginnings always involved a mixture of dance and drama therapy together. And then after a couple of years, I decided to go back to graduate school while still working there. And so I went back to Yale to get my doctorate in clinical psychology, but continued to work as a drama therapist. And I did my thesis on drama therapy. And then I got hired at the Veterans Hospital here in New Haven, and began to be in charge of a psychiatric unit. And so began to do drama therapy on the unit. And the good thing, since I was in charge, I could just decide to do it, and I didn't have to ask anybody's permission. But in the meantime, Susan encouraged me to present my work at the Psychodrama Conference in New York. So in 1975, my workshop, which was called Drama Therapy, was presented at the Psychodrama Conference. And they allowed me to do it. And there was some concern by the psychodramatists about what this was, because back then, people thought that psychodrama was drama therapy. So there's no need for drama therapy. We already have it. In that workshop, at the end of it, a little lady, half my height and about 60 years old, came up to me and didn't say a word. And she just handed me a slip of paper. And on the paper it said, "I am Gert Shatner. I am a drama therapist. I'm writing a book on drama therapy. Will you contribute a chapter?" And I looked down at her and I said, of course. And then she leaned forward and said, and then we need an association. And I leaned forward and said, absolutely. And so she lived in New York City. She was a Austrian Jew who had left in World War II and emigrated to Switzerland, and then after World War II to the United States. And she had been doing drama therapy for a number of years, all by herself. And she had friends, Jewish friends up in New Haven. And so she would take the train, the 2-hour train ride up to New Haven. Mm-hmm. So what we did between 1975 and 1977 was we would go on that train together. So she would come up and visit her friends, and then I would join her, and the two of us would go into New York on the train. And it was on those train rides that we decided to start the National Association for Drama Therapy in the United States. And the problem was that there were very few drama therapists who called themselves, in fact, almost nobody. So that means we had to invite people to join us who didn't think of themselves as drama therapists. So anyway, so we invited 3 other people who included Eleanor Irwin, who was very well known at the time. And then we met in 1977, and then we invited a larger group of about 20 people together, people who were performers, who were child drama people, who were psychologists, who were community activists, all theater, but we're in the schools, everything. And by 1979, we kind of pulled it together and formed the association and began the profession in the United States. Really very closely in time to what Sue Jennings and Marion Lindquist were doing in England. So their association started around the same time. Mm-hmm. And we knew about them, but we were not in close contact at the time. Once we created the association, then we began to get into contact with the drama therapists in Britain, mm-hmm. and then eventually the Dutch in the Netherlands. So that became a big thing in my life. I became one of the president after Gert, very much forming and working on creating the field and coming up with all the different parts of it. And then later combining with the music, art, and dance therapy associations as well. So that became really kind of a major passion for me. Mm-hmm. Back then, we were just trying to basically exist. There weren't even like methods of drama therapy. It was just, you do this, I'm doing that. We're doing some theater games, or we're doing some plays, or we're improvising. There were no methods at all during the 1980s. We just tried to find members, have conferences, mm-hmm. learn, share. So it was a time of great creativity. It wasn't until the 1990s that people began to come up with differentiated methods. Mm-hmm. Robert Landy came up with the role method. Renee Amuna, the 5-phase model. I came up with developmental transformations. Pam Dunn with neurodrama. Sue Jennings had her approach. Some of the more textual-based stuff from the UK, etc. So that was really what happened in the 1990s.
May I ask you, you mentioned approach and method. Does it mean the same thing for you, or you differentiate that?
I think those are synonyms. They mean the same thing.
Okay.
In the US, they mean the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And in terms of DvT, I was pretty much doing it by myself and doing workshops. People liked it. They thought it was very like a warm-up because I was getting in a circle and people were moving, and people thought it was very light compared to psychodrama, which was, people were crying and it was very dramatic and it was very personal. Whereas I was doing all this kind of creative drama stuff. It was viewed as very, like a warm up.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Renee Amuna in her first book lists developmental transformations in her phase 1 as a warm up technique. By the way. But I understood that there was something more to it, because instead of kind of creating a narrative, it was reducing and taking away a narrative. So it was using improv to kind of take away things, leaving the self in presence. So I had that sense, but very few other people felt that. So I was kind of alone. And then what happened was, with Robert Landy's master's degree, they needed to come and do an internship. So people began to come up to the VA and do an internship with me. And so I had to teach it. And so a group of students began to be interested in what that was. And they were kind of asking me for more learning and like, what do you do after the internship? And, is there a way to be trained in this and all of that? And that they eventually, the students, pushed me to form a training institute in 1992. So in 1992, I made it formal, and Developmental Transformations became a training institute that took place over a couple of years. In the very beginning, there were so few people, and I felt awkward about requiring therapy because I'd be the only one who could do the therapy, and I was also the teacher. So we just met in group until one day, this one student, the intern, who wants to remain anonymous, turned to me and said, David, I want to go into therapy with you in developmental transformations, in DvT. And I said, well, that's a problem because you're my intern, and that's a kind of a conflict of interest. That's a dual role. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me right in the eye and said, David, you're the only person who knows how to do it. So if I'm taking this seriously, I need to be doing it. I need to be in therapy in the method. And that means I must be in therapy with you. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to argue with that. Yeah. So I said, well, I don't know. Okay, so you finish your internship, then we'll wait 3 months. And then if you're still interested, I'll do it. And so that's what happened. And so this person lived in New York City, took a 45-minute subway ride to Grand Central Station, took a 2-hour train ride to New Haven. I picked her up at the train station. We had an hour and 15-minute session. I drove her back to the train station. She took a 2-hour train ride back to New York and a 45-minute subway back to her home. Once a week for 4 years.
Wow. A lot of efforts to being involved.
So I said to myself, I know I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do it if it was Sigmund Freud. I mean, that's taking a whole day. But she did. So I said to myself, there's got to be something here. And that's when I began to take it seriously. And other students from New York began to do the same thing. So there was a time when quite a few people were taking that train ride to New Haven to see me for therapy. And out of that group became the basis of the DvT Institute. Mm-hmm. And that's when we began to require training therapy. And of course, once I had trained that original group, then they were able to do training therapy. It wasn't just me. And so the Institute grew, through the 1990s and the 2000s. More and more people got interested. And then, we developed institutes in San Francisco, in Chicago, Boston, New York, New Haven. And then it began to spread to the UK and the Netherlands, then Prague, Israel, China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Montreal, and spread to, we have about 18 institutes now around the world. So it all just began to, develop over time, which has been very fun and gratifying for me because there are people who have just as much experience as I do, who I can bounce ideas off of. And so, it's been creating a wonderful community of people who are sharing a passion and knowledge about things. And I joke because I'm not a graduate. I didn't graduate from the DvT Institute. I'm the least credentialed person. I didn't go through a formalized training. I just made the thing up. I just made it up. So really, if you want some expertise in DvT, don't come to me. Okay. People that I train. I've never been in a long-term DvT therapy. We require it now for everyone, but I didn't have it for myself.
That's what I was thinking, right, during your storytelling. And have you ever thought about, like, you would go to DvT therapy to somebody?
Yes, which is, I'm hoping, the idea was that I would create an institute, train people who would train people, and eventually come up with somebody that I would want to be in therapy with. So I'm hoping that there would be produced somebody that I could then be in therapy with, and probably that'll happen. Who knows? But yeah. So I just remind people that I'm the least trained, and I don't want to minimize what I've been able to accomplish, but the people who came after me are better trained than I was. And that's true for all the pioneers in all the different methods. Anyway, so I have a certain amount of humility around the fact that for me, it was basically making one mistake after another.
Mm-hmm.
Just, discovering that what I've been doing was not needed and was a mistake, and stopped doing it. And then I learned that way. Mm-hmm. Almost all from patients, from clients that were further than I was, and they showed me the way. And I was open enough to go, oh my goodness, is that the way? And together we kind of took the risk of going further. Mm-hmm. Because, DvT is a certain amount of risk. That's what we say. It's not safe to be with another person. And if you come to a DvT session and you're in a little room with one other person and no objects, no furniture, just a carpet, some pillow, it's just you and them. So that's scary for most people. And what are you supposed to do together? And so it's like an improv, right? It's not planning something out. It's trying to be in the moment, to deal with what's coming at you and handling it in a meaningful and creative way. So all the way along, as we kept dropping things, and just it was the encounter between the client and the therapist, or in a group, all the people there. And so what DvT is people. Sometimes in schools or in hospitals, there'll be a DvT group going, and somebody is on the outside and they go, "Oh my God, what's going on in there? It's so loud." And some people say DvT is loud. And that's not right. DvT is not loud. People are loud. And all it means is that we're just giving the people a chance to be people. And guess what? They're loud most of the time, not all the time, of course. But a lot of, and they're energetic and they're full of things. And most of us have been scrunched and pushed down in our lives, told to be quiet. And so in DvT, we let people kind of, let it out. So all sorts of things come out.
Mm-hmm.
And people come out, So that's really all that DvT is in a theatrical frame. So it's not just being real, it's being playing. So it's play space. And over the years, it's really been remarkable how the theory has changed, and the way we work has changed, and different people do it differently, and different institutes do it slightly differently, and because there's no one way to be together, and all of it's good, and so we have a great time with it. People get angry at me because every 8 to 10 years I change the theory. I'm working on that now. Text for Practitioners 3. The theory is all going to be changed, and people are not going to like that, because they just spent 4 or 5 years learning the theory, and then they're going to discover that there's a new theory. Too bad.
More messy.
Yeah, too bad. But we're improvising, so we got to keep changing. We're not going to keep repeating. That's part of the theory, right? So
I have a question. You mentioned like the people are loud, people are together. You have 18 institutes around the world. And as I traveled also, I experienced DvT with people from different nations, different personalities. But anyway, from my perspective, and that's the question to you, if you can see the differences in DvT due to the nations, like the USA, and the USA, big country. It's also the north of USA is quite different from the south of the USA. Maybe just thinking, if you can see what are the differences in DvT in different institutes, if it's possible to name it, or
sure, yeah, definitely. In fact, over the years, we've done a number of workshops in this where we would have 2 Czech people, therapist and client, do a session in Czech, 2 Chinese people, 2 British people, 2 French people, and have everyone look at it and just talk together about what the differences are. I don't think there's one answer to this, but I do have, which is that I've noticed that national identity or cultural identity lies kind of at the surface of our self. So when people come to a DvT group, they'll behave along the lines of their cultural and national identities. So in the United States of America, everyone's, very expressive, and they are talking all the time, and, they're jumping up and down, and there's a lot of kind of, joyous things. In the Asian countries, everyone sits, and looks to the leader to start the session in a very orderly manner. Israelis and Germans tend to be more critical, ask a lot of questions, are more in their heads, this kind of a thing. The Brits do their thing. Everyone has kind of their own surface approach. But as the improvisational process gets going, as things kind of fall off, the play gets more and more similar, because DvT kind of pulls out the natural state of play of children. And around the world, the natural state of play of children is very similar. It's only children become socialized in their own families and nations the differences begin to emerge. But if you get small children in a playground in most places who are, 2 years old, 3 years old, they're all doing the same thing. And so I think that we found that in the end, when you move toward states of deep play and more kind of intimate play, the similarities get more and the differences get less. But obviously, every individual is different. So it's not like everything is the same, but the styles start off being very different. I did a DvT workshop in Japan. And, I came in and these were all mental health professionals, and they all sat there in a circle looking at me, and they all bowed, and they waited for me to start. And, I started and they all followed me exactly. And they were interested in following me exactly. And I tried to get them to do variations, and I had to instruct them on what to do. And then once it got going, they started to get the idea. And then it ended up being in the same kind of running around, having fun and playing that you'd see elsewhere. In Greece, the Greek thing, they're very intimate and they're very warm. And I would do one thing after another, and one of the students would come up to me really close. Right from the beginning, really close, and go, "I'm looking in your eyes. I see your eyes." And it was like I fell in love with each one of them, like within minutes, because that's the way of the Greek culture. It's like this whole kind of, this thing and the proximity. In the Netherlands, within a few seconds, everyone's having sex. They're all playing with homophobia. They're doing crazy stuff that was terrifying. It was like, oh my God, we just whoa, slow down, everyone. We're just trying to do this. Stop having sex. No, we're not doing sex. Stop. This kind of thing. But then eventually, as they got going, they slowed down, and they began to get in touch with who they were as people, and not just performing this whatever it is that they do there. Because the Dutch are much more open. I mean, they're much more. They don't have curtains on their windows.
Yeah.
The Russians, everything is closed off. You have to get in. In Russia, they don't want to look. You can't look into their homes directly. So the national character definitely expresses itself, but only temporarily. So I think in the end, you discover that what's shared by humanity, and also the differences, and both are really fun to explore.
Thank you very much. I have a question in my mind. You mentioned witnessing circle. I know that there is one PhD thesis about witnessing circle, and you said that comes from the authentic movement. So could you remember, maybe, if it's possible, the moment when you come up like, oh, we will need this, and how you create it? because it's kind of magical carpet, like from Aladdin's story,
Yeah,
What is this?
absolutely. And there was a moment. So in the 1970s, I was part of a small improvisational group that we worked, and DvT really kind of came out of that personally. That was the closest thing I did to my own personal work, because it was a group of 5 of us who improvised for hours together every week. And we did that for several years, and we really became just the whole process of what would become DvT emerged there. But then we got interested in performing. So we began to perform on Friday nights in my loft in New Haven, and people would come and sit, and we would do improv using transformations, using DvT. And we did this one, and most of the time we would improvise together, usually 3 or 4 of us at a time. And we devised this thing that became what we call the cauldron, which was one person would begin the improv, taking audience suggestions, and then another person would come in and join them, and then another person would join, and then maybe somebody would leave. And it was very entertaining, and we had a whole structure around it. And I thought it would be useful to actually create like a place where the person coming in could sort of stand for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled this circular carpet that I had in the space, and I put it there. And so what happened was the person would stand there in the circle and then come into the play. And at that time, I had been working on my group drama therapy, group DvT, but I hadn't, and I said, there's got to be a way to do this individually. There's got to be a way to do this with an individual, and I hadn't figured it out. So on a certain night, it was probably in 1982, 83, we were performing, and everyone left the improv except for one person who was out there alone. And we had never done that, where one person was alone for a long time. And they were just improvising by themselves in front of the audience, and then we were on the side. And then I came in, I finally decided I'll come in, and I came into the circle, but I waited to build the tension.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, I realized, wait a minute, I could be sitting here as a witness, as the therapist, and the client could be improvising in front of me, and then I can come in.
Mm-hmm.
So then I came in. So the next day, I asked one of my patients to do it. I took that circle. I still have it. It's a green. It's all messy now, but it's a pale green, ugly circle carpet. And I started to improvise with them. And then I said, I'm going to go to the circle and you keep improvising. But I'll come back. And I had known about authentic movement, where there was a witness who didn't sit in the circle, but sat on the side. But I realized by having a circle,
Mm-hmm.
it demarcates a space that I can come in and out of, because I knew that I needed to be in at times. And that's how it began. And so it worked. From that next day with the client, it was like, bingo, this is it. And I knew the thing. And then I named it the witnessing circle after authentic movement. And then I decided to standardize the circle at 40 inches. The original circle was bigger, but I decided to make it 40 inches because 40 is a historical sign of exile. So you think about 40 days in the desert or 40 years in the desert. So 40 has always been a sign of exile, of being away. So just for fun. And so the witnessing circles are 40 inches just basically a meter in diameter. And that was it from there on, and bingo. And then I would say a couple of years later, I wrote the first article on individual transformations. And based on that, and the witnessing circle was there from the beginning. And we've always found the witnessing circle, you don't have to go in there, but it helps explore possibilities of being close or being away with the client. And of course, the client plays with it. The client goes in there. The client picks it up and runs away with it and says, ha, 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 you can't go in it. Then you say, well, I'm sorry, it doesn't work for you. It only works for me, and you play with that.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the moment. And it came out in an improv performance when I had the moment of like, this is it. So
you should sell this story to Hollywood. I pictured like that was the night. It was quite nice,
the witness was formed. Yes.
I can see it like in Star Wars movie also, something like that. I have a lot of questions, but maybe for me, you making notes. You answered a lot of questions. As we are going close to end for your time. I have a lot, based on your experiences traveling, being researcher, being clinician. Hard question. What do you think that the drama therapy or DvT needs for a future?
Yeah.
Or what should be the future of drama therapy?
Right.
In USA, internationally, or whatsoever?
Yeah. Well, in the early years, we were hoping that we would become like social work or psychologists or, that kind of a thing. And we have succeeded in many places to be recognized as a mental health professional. So particularly in the US, England, and the Netherlands, but increasingly in other countries. Drama therapist is recognized, and like an art therapist, dance therapist, music therapist, creative arts therapist, and hospitals and other people will hire them. And there are many fewer of them than social workers or counselors or psychologists, but they can do therapy, they can work in the schools, etc. So that's good. We have not developed research. And there is some research going on, a little bit, but most of the people who come into our field are not researchers. So I don't view research as being, like, I'm talking about real quantitative research. I don't view that as that's not going to be a major part of our field. We are clinicians. We do things. We practice. And there's just not enough people who have the skills to do research. And we've been doing better on writing. So we've been putting out more books, articles. The journals have had better and better articles in them. So I think that the respect that we can get has been increasing and will increase because of our writing.
Mm-hmm.
But it won't be scientific writing. It'll be clinical writing. The drama therapy and DvT is all about what it means to be human. And so on issues of social justice, racism, sexism, homophobia, we're way ahead of other people. And drama therapy and DvT attracts people who are interested in social justice in the world. And I think that That's been a strong force within drama therapy as a whole, particularly in the United States, but I think it's going to be everywhere. So I see a very strong, I can see the drama therapy community being leaders of social justice in own small way around the world. And a lot of people have been doing some really amazing work with DvT and not DvT. Because, theater is really a form of testimony, telling a story. And so it really works very well for people who've been through something terrible to be able to communicate to other people about it. And in DvT, I think DvT, like some of the other drama therapy methods, it can be a deep psychotherapy for people. They can really get in touch with what it is to be a human being, and not just the roles that they play, and not their story, and not the drama of their life, but actually just what is it like to actually be here and to sense the world and to kind of enjoy the mystery of like to be human, of existence. And particularly don't take me wrong, but there are some forms of drama therapy that, to me, are just too damn serious. And they take themselves too seriously. And they're not fun. DvT is fun. And it intends to be fun, because I found fun is good.
Right.
And yeah, just in and of itself, fun is good. It's healthy to have fun.
A lot of things.
It's very important. Anyway, so DvT, is not based on the theater tradition of tragedy, like psychodrama, where you have the lone protagonist at the end on his knees crying. DvT is more comedic and comedy, with basically people running around kind of being more joyous and running around and doing clownish, funny things. And in our world, which has become so serious and which has become so pressing to people, I do think that DvT will be something that people will want to do to relieve themselves from the burden of everyday life, to be joyous, to be happy together, to be simple about things and not to complicate things. So I do think DvT will always have a place where to help bring some joy. It's not the only thing that can bring joy. Many things bring joy. So it's not that DvT is the only thing at all. But it's one way of doing that. And I think that's going to be needed even more. And when AI, the artificial intelligence, takes over, is being done by robots, all we will have to do is to basically do DvT. That'll be the only thing left we can do, because, and even AI will probably do DvT. Who knows?
So it will be the last job on the planet Earth, DvT therapy?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's possible. It's who knows? But I think it's clear after 50 years now that the creative arts therapist will not grow in percentage of all the different mental health professionals. It's always going to be kind of on the side. I would not predict that it's going to suddenly grow, because, if you want to be a music therapist, most music therapists have some talent in music, and most drama therapists have some talent in theater, and most art therapists have talent in art. And a lot of people don't have talent in these areas and are not that interested in becoming that. So I think it'll always have a role. I think I don't see it going away, which is a huge accomplishment, because when we began, there were so few of us that it could easily go away, you know. So it's good to see in the Czech Republic. It's good to see in Europe and in other countries, in India and China, more and more interest in the creative arts therapies and drama therapy. So I feel good about that. You know, I feel we have a solid future, but it will be limited.
That's true, but also I can see that more, for example, psychologists or like the psychotherapists are interested in. And from my perspective, as I know, the conferences, they are trying to bring creative art therapies more in and talk what does the psychotherapy and creative art therapies has in common, how does it help. I know many psychologists or psychotherapists who using the pieces from the drama therapy, playing with roles or improvisation or whatsoever for their own practice.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as you mentioned, that we will probably not grow. I can see from my experience and from my clients. Also, if you're in verbal therapy and psychotherapy, it's a little bit more safe to talk, and it's not so safe to be in the body, embodied and involved, really involved. There's, as you mentioned, there's nowhere to hide.
Yes, I mean, I think that there are different approaches. I mean, the you know, many movement therapists or sensory motor therapists are sitting and they talk to their patients and they say, close your eyes, and I want you to bring your attention to your, you know, stomach, bring attention to your breathing, and they call that embodied work, and that's very safe. You know, that's most everyone can do that, and it's not. Where you get unsafe is where the therapist is interacting with the client. And so DvT, where the therapist is in an embodied way interacting with the client, is the most bold. And people get very nervous about it because it's like, you know, what's going to happen? And so that DvT is less safe, but it's intending to be less safe because that's where you grow, is where you're being challenged. And of course, it's not so unsafe that you withdraw. But, you know, hey, skiing is unsafe and riding a bicycle is unsafe. As I say over and over again, a bicycle is a very unstable thing, and people fall off bicycles all the time. Not only that, people get injured every year from bicycles. Not only that, there are many people who die from head injury from bicycles. Mm-hmm. So in any country, there may be hundreds of people every year who die from riding a bicycle. Nobody has suggested banning bicycles. Do you know how many people have died from drama therapy?
Hopefully nobody.
Nobody. DvT? Nobody. So we are safer than bicycles.
And definitely than the car.
And a car. Think about cars. Think about skiing accidents. Think about, think about almost anything. So when people think that we're unsafe, it's like, excuse me, playing football is unsafe. You know, people get injured. Mm-hmm. So nobody gets, now people might cry in DvT or in therapy. So if you think crying is dangerous and is a horrible thing, then you could say, yes, DvT is dangerous. But if you don't think crying is the end of the world, then DvT is very safe. Okay, and you should watch yourself when you ride your bicycle. You should wear a helmet.
Mm.
You don't need to wear a helmet in DvT.
I have a last question for you because we are at the end of the time. It's 13th of November 2023. A short advertisement for new text for practitioners. Have you any idea what will be the publishing date?
It will be in 2024, and it won't be before July, and it will be hopefully before December. So somewhere in there.
Okay. So David, thank you very much for
Jacob,
your talking. Thank you very much for the history and
great.
state your experience. And
All right.
maybe if any questions from the community or from other people will raise up, I hope that you will find maybe a few more minutes for me in next time to meet.
I would love to. Love to.
It was honored to meet.
Bye-bye.
Bye.